Well, good morning, CHD TV. It is your host, Dr. Brian Hooker. And if you see my face, then it must be Friday morning, January 16th. Welcome to 2026. I think this is my second show actually in 2026. But I have some really important guests today. And this is the show that you really need to spread the word on. I know I say that a lot. We have a lot of important guests, but these guests are trailblazers. And right now, let's bring on Kirsten Cosgrove and Shelley Boyce. Thank you so much for joining us. Kirsten, you and I have known each other for several years now. We worked on several different projects. Not only have you been a real strong advocate for children and for health freedom in children, but you've also been instrumental in several different research studies. Kirsten, tell me a little bit more about your background. I'm going to do this with Shelley as well, but tell me a little bit more about your background, and then we'll get into the details of what you'd like to talk about today.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. I think that the information that we get out today in the story is going to be unbelievable to your entire audience. And like you said, it's very important. But I've been in clinical research since 2001, and over the last 5-6 years now, my eyes get opened, and I've just dedicated most of my time now on helping bring truth to medical freedom and how we can help our vaccine injured in the post-pandemic era, and the damage that we're seeing. And now I've been lucky enough to be dear friends with Shelley Boyce, and I've been walking along beside her and Judah's story over the last 2 years, and we find ourselves on a new mission today in trying to help parents empower their kids when they're undergoing pediatric cancer diagnoses.
I want to thank you for sharing your story, for using your story to help so many others. We're going to delve into the details of this and then also the call of action. But you're also an advocate for health freedom where? In North Carolina, is that correct?
Yeah. And, I like to not say anything about credentials because I don't want a parent to think they need something special to get informed consent for their child.
Right.
Regardless of what I do professionally, I'm a parent of almost 14 years, and I've been in the medical freedom movement just about as long. And I kind of thought it was mostly about vaccines and food and bodily autonomy, but it turns out the world of pediatric cancer is ugly. And
It really
we
is.
never thought we'd find ourselves here. We do everything to insulate ourselves from this type of thing. I'm sure everybody's first question is, do you vaccinate? No, this shouldn't have happened
No,
to us.
we've dealt with it at Children's Health Defense. I've had a lot of situations, a lot of cases where I've heard the same thing, and I thank you for being able to step forward, not only with your experience with Judah, but also to help so many other families. But Kirsten, let's go back to you. You're going to give us kind of the overview of this story.
Sure. So 2 years ago this month, Judah was a 6-year-old, about to be 7, and he got diagnosed with ALL. And it was really remarkable walking along the Boyce family and watching Judah in this situation. He went into remission very, very quickly because of the complementary integrative therapies that the family chose to utilize. And there's a myriad of them. They go well into the double digits, but because of how healthy Judah was, the doctors questioned why this was the presentation of this child, because it's not typical. And so, we watched Judah go to birthday parties, go swimming. He went to soccer camp. My son went to vacation Bible school with him. It was really incredible just to see his quality of life. Well, last July, things took a turn. And the reason why they took a turn is because he was doing so well. Shelley and her husband, Sean, at this point, they were under the care of St. Jude's, went to his appointment, and they brought 2 published studies asking, can we look at what was used in these studies? Because can we personalize this at all? Because Judah isn't your typical kid going through chemo. He's doing so well. He's not in and out of the hospital like most kids are. He's going to school, all of these things. Because of that question, because of those published papers being brought into their office, that started this line of questioning. And that was last July. And from July until October, the family, every monthly visit, the family was told, okay, if his immune system didn't look as suppressed as it needed to because he was looking too healthy, then they were threatening a CPS referral. And ALL is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And just to clarify that. And so that occurred in October. A CPS referral was made by St. Jude's accusing the family of non-compliance of providing Judah his oral medications at home, even though the family, Shelly and Sean, they had a nurse come into their house every night at 8 p.m. at bedtime for an 8-year-old, and they videotaped him getting his oral meds. They had the nurse document it, and it was legally binding. Essentially, they went through a 5 or 6 week CPS, not a battle, but it felt like a battle on the daily. Luckily, by the grace of God, this CPS referral has concluded and nothing has come of it. But this isn't the story of every family. This isn't the ending of every family. And so, here we are. It's 2026. Parents are finding themselves, if they get a pediatric cancer diagnosis, it's a one-size-fits-all protocol. And they are forcing parents to either go with that standard, those outdated protocols, and exactly, what's been used for 40 years, or they risk being targeted with having their kids taken away only for asking questions. And I can stand by this family. It's caused immeasurable trauma. You don't know how that effect is going to be, but essentially that's our case in a nutshell. And right now, we just want to bring this story out. We want to empower parents to be able to advocate for their kids without fear, and we want to bring the successful therapy that helped Judah, almost flourish during this time period, and bring that information to other families. And it doesn't have to be your typical pediatric chemotherapy case.
Exactly. And again, Shelley, thank you so much for stepping forward. I can't even imagine what it's like to go through having a child with a cancer diagnosis in the first place. But it seemed like the way the system handled things, basically, number one, with a lockstep protocol, one size fits all, Kirsten, as you said, protocol that is forced on you. And then on top of that, marginalizing parents, questioning parents. What was that like to go through?
It was pretty scary. I think at the point of diagnosis, the doctor who delivered the diagnosis did his grand speech. He has this slogan we've heard he says to other parents where he says, if you were going to get a pediatric cancer, this is the one you want to get. And they had a social worker between me and the door. And he seemed surprised that I wasn't sobbing, upset. He said, do you need me to call your husband? And I was sitting there thinking, I am more scared that they're not going to let us leave than I am of cancer.
Right.
Because what they made clear and what we've learned since is that every state, all 50 states have laws that say if a parent refuses to consent to what a doctor considers life-saving care, the standard of care for that life-saving need, the doctor can consent on the child's behalf or on the parent's behalf. You don't have to consent. We didn't even have to sign forms. They were going to do it regardless. If we refused, they would just find a foster family to see him through treatment. From day one, we were made aware of that. And the problem is that the standard of care is a very outdated protocol. Most of it's about 40 years old. It's rarely updated. This is a small sample size, right? There are not a lot of kids to test. But not only do they not let you look into alternative treatments besides chemo, we were forbidden from doing parallel care in addition to chemo. So if you think about adults, if heaven forbid your friend is diagnosed, the first thing they're going to do is start asking, what are my other options? What can I do? Is there any way to handle this or soften the effects of chemo, right? We all know that it's hard. In the pediatric world, you're just not allowed to. And the risk of doing it quietly or asking too many questions is CPS. So for example, we wanted to try high dose vitamin C and they just said, no, it could boost his immune system and we're trying to suppress it. You're just not allowed to. We asked for regular panels on his vitamin D levels. They said, no, you don't need to know that. Well, the research tells us we do.
Right.
And on it went. And so you're in this impossible situation where we know how to manage his symptoms, but if we do it too well, we get in trouble. And we're not refusing chemo. We are doing the chemo because there is no option. We met a family who helped us understand that when you try to leave the country to an international clinic, and when you try to come back, they'll take your children, all of them. You're not allowed to go seek alternative care. Once you have a diagnosis, you are locked in. The problem is that the standard of care is not cutting edge research. It's not the latest. We know we can do better than this.
It seems so, in a way, corporatized that you must follow this protocol. I mean, that it had to have been, first of all, extremely frightening, because and honestly, Shelley, I think I would have had the same reaction as like, okay, well, cancer we can perhaps deal with, but then having your child that so intimate into the system is every parent's nightmare, especially in the health freedom movement.
Yes.
So you were under investigation. Ultimately, they did refer to CPS. If you could say what precipitated that, and in as much or little detail you feel comfortable going into, and what was it like to be under investigation at CPS, and then what was the conclusion?
Sure. So like Kirsten said, the threats of CPS started for about 3 months. The clinical notes contain threats. We will refer to CPS if his ANC doesn't drop. That's what they're watching for. His ANC was hovering around 2,000. They wanted to see it at 1,500 or less. They expect these kids to be neutropenic because of the chemo. His was not, for a variety of reasons, including things like we have an organic farm and we were feeding him organ meat from our own clean cattle that we raised. That kept his red blood counts really strong. He has access to fresh breast milk because I have a baby. It's full of stem cells and white blood cells. His gut health is top notch. His ANC wasn't dropping for lots and lots of reasons, including those. And they put right in the clinical notes that none of that could impact his outcomes. And we just thought, but the evidence says otherwise. And so the tipping point, like Kirsten says, I brought 2 studies. One of them is from a researcher in the Netherlands, and he specifically studies how to reduce the toxicity of ALL treatment, this exact diagnosis. It's the most common childhood cancer. And one way he does that, we actually contacted him and got his full study protocol, hundreds of pages he sent us to share with our doctors. He was wonderful, Dr. Rob Peters. And he removes 3 of the drugs that they get in the last year and a half of treatment, 3 chemo drugs. That's a big deal, 3 less drugs.
Yes.
One of them is given by lumbar puncture straight to the spinal cord and brain, and they call it preventive, to make sure the leukemia cells don't go into the spinal fluid. There's no cancer there, but they're trying to make sure it doesn't show up there. So it's serious. He's under anesthesia once a month.
Wow.
So we showed this really good study. It's very big. It's years old. We said, what if we considered backing off of some of this? He's doing beautifully. There's been no relapse. He was in remission in 8 days. He meets all the criteria. If we were in the Netherlands, he would absolutely be in this protocol. And instead of having, we were gentle. We knew not to upset the people who were handling our care. And so we were gentle. And the response was the doctor raised his voice and said, we don't question the protocol. This is the protocol that every kid with ALL gets. And to not follow it would be to endanger your child. And that was the first mention of CPS in that appointment verbally. And then in the file notes that followed, they were very upset that we would ask questions. Wow. And these are not cherry-picked, obscure studies. These are big, 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 big. Another one was a meta-analysis of ALL treatment for the last 40 years. And it said that 2 of the drugs given once a month are not showing any benefit, only toxicity. And they don't need to be given to kids in the low risk category anymore, which he is. He's low risk by their terms. And they didn't want it. They just couldn't discuss it. And it's very interesting. I don't think they're bad people. I think maybe they don't have the authority to make changes to the national protocol. Almost every hospital nationwide that does this follows the Children's Oncology Group protocols. They sort of have a stronghold on all of the cancer treatment centers. The only exceptions are St. Jude's does it just a little bit differently, and Dana-Farber does it a little differently. Otherwise, we're all getting the same treatment anywhere we go. And so a lot of people said, why didn't you just get a second opinion? Because, well, we did, and we got that answer. Well, you can go anywhere in the country to any pediatric cancer institute, and they're going to tell you, we follow the Children's Oncology Group protocol. It's all the same. It doesn't matter where you go. There is no second opinion except for the ones outside of the system. So we went to independent doctors, we went to integrative oncologists, and they certainly had alternative options, but their opinions are not considered the standard of care, so that's neglect.
So as soon as you get that diagnosis, then you are, you're in this labyrinth where, if you dare deviate from a 40-year-old standard of care, then you're basically risking out-of-home placement for your child and other children, correct?
Right.
And not only deviating, but just asking the questions.
The CPS referral, the two claims they made against us were, one, that we refused life-saving treatment. We don't refuse anything. That's a clinical event that you document. There was no refusal. We received every dose they made us get. The second claim they made was that we were not giving the oral meds at home. The catch there is that you could see them in his blood work. They tested at every visit to see that they were there. We had our attorney send a letter explaining all the studies we found that showed why those results would be variable from the average kid based on supplements and the things he's taking, and based on his genetic panel that says he detoxes faster than the average human. This drug they're talking about has a 1 hour half-life, and his genes say he detoxes quickly. Tell me that's not going to make a difference in the levels in his blood when they test him. And then the third thing we did is like Kirsten said, we hired a nurse. And she came every single day, and we paid her. And we tried to show them the videos and the log of her visits, and they wouldn't look. So that happened before they made the referral. When the CPS social workers came out, fortunately, we had covered all our bases. We had everything printed. We handed it to them. We showed them. They said they weren't there to remove a child. There was no claim of abuse or drug use or anything. Literally the only two things they were investigating were we giving the chemo at home? And why did we refuse life-saving treatment? And that was, but you asked how it felt. It was terrifying.
Yes.
Because they could come at any time. They looked around our house and they started picking apart other things. Our toddler, our 1-year-old, had a scrape on his head the day they came first, as toddlers do. He'd been walking and falling, as toddlers do. They made me take him to the ER. And we called our pediatrician right there. We said, CPS is here. Can we bring the baby? They wanted to go with us. And you can check him out. And he said, yeah. And he made an appointment right away. And they said, no, we're not going to your pediatrician. We're good at taking you to a public one, like one we pick. So they followed me in my car to the ER. We were there for hours. The doctor finally came in, looked at my happy little toddler bouncing around, climbing up and down, and said, he looks great. And he put that in the note summary. He said, your kid looks great. And they signed off on the social worker documents and we left. But from that point on, the terror, they questioned all of our kids about abuse, even though that was explicitly in the note that was not what the referral for. So my 6-year-old now has all these questions. Why would someone touch a child in their private parts? Why are they asking me this? The one-on-one questioning at every visit was terrifying for these kids.
Oh, yeah.
We don't normalize them talking
trauma inflicted on your children for, really a non-offense. I mean, 2 non-events that never happened. You never refused care. And you never, he got all of his meds on time, and it was in his blood. I mean, this is basically intolerable abuse and harassment.
And all of the kids. It wasn't just Judah.
All 4 kids.
All 4 of the kids. I mean, there was one afternoon where my son and I stopped by, and little Micah, the toddler, he's over crouching in a corner because he is so terrified of anyone coming to his home. I mean, it was terrible to witness.
And they'd tell the kids, we can come talk to you at school. We're allowed to talk to you alone anytime we need to. And so Judah, at the center of this, cries every morning as the bus comes towards the driveway. He just sobs. He's afraid to go to school. He's afraid he won't get to come home. They think that it's over now, and they don't know. How do you explain that to kids, that it's over? Because we don't know. He's still in treatment. We could end up with another doctor who loses their mind again about being questioned. So here we are. We have a few more months of treatment left, and we just can't ask questions, and we can't manage his symptoms too well. So we have to let him be nauseous. We have to let him have daily headaches and stomach aches. And we know we can help. And even gentle things. We asked about using cannabinoids. At this point, even the American Cancer Society, very mainstream, says cannabinoids at the right dose can manage chemo side effects. They said no, because we haven't studied it well enough in kids yet. Yeah, but there's no risk. And if it's that or Zofran, we do know that's dangerous. It's cardiotoxic. It causes constipation. It requires other drugs to manage its side effects. To just be able to hide behind this, well, we don't know. We don't know in kids because we're never going to know if you don't let some of us become a case study. We got to start somewhere.
Well, and not only that, they see this child who is doing so well, and instead of saying, what are you doing? Can you inform us and let us know how we can help other kids and help them feel better and have a better quality of life as they're going through this? They wanted to put their blinders on. And meanwhile, we have current state-of-the-art research that's being conducted using some of the same methodology that the Boyces used for Judah, and it's being published now, and they aren't allowed to even utilize that information to help other kids. So it's all just so backwards.
It really is. I mean, the level of control, the level of aggression, and the lack of curiosity. I study healthy children, and in these days, that is a rarity. But every day that I come in and I get to study healthy children like Judah that are, that are under horrible circumstances, but yet still thriving, it just enables more questions. So when I encounter people of, and the tales that you're telling of the lack of curiosity that they had when they had a subject that was doing so well, I mean, that's really disheartening. Should not happen. And so then how do we move forward? First of all, Shelley, with your family, I mean, you're coping with a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional trauma that was inflicted. How are you moving forward now?
We kind of feel like life's on hold. He finishes treatment April 3rd. The timeline is set regardless of how they respond to treatment. So he is free from this prison sentence on April 3rd. That means his oral chemo stops, the infusion stop. We're almost there. The catch, though, is that the standard of care includes monthly blood draws and monitoring for survivorship. Chemo causes other cancers. They want to monitor for relapse until he's 18. So our next big challenge is figuring out, we need a doctor to step up and say, I'll handle his survivorship outside of the hospital system, because if his blood work looks funny, we can't do this again. What's interesting is that there's published peer-reviewed research that tells us ALL, the specific diagnosis, is usually triggered by a virus, often something in the herpes family, like Epstein-Barr. So a diagnosis we pushed. We said, please test for Epstein-Barr. I carry chronic Epstein-Barr. I suspect he was born with it. We pushed. They finally sent in an infectious disease doctor, and he told us, don't worry, chemo kills viruses. Does that sound crazy to anybody else? Chemo suppresses the immune system. It doesn't allow it to work. And finally, they agreed to test, and sure enough, he had a positive PCR for Epstein-Barr the day they started chemo. And it did not change the course of treatment. We said, pause. Let's stabilize the active infection and then talk about chemo. And they said no. And the other interesting thing is that they start chemo before they do a biopsy of the marrow, because they're so sure that based on one round of blood work, one panel, a CBC, that when they see lymphoblasts in the blood, it's definitely leukemia. We need to start chemo. They didn't do the biopsy until after they started the treatment. And we even showed them case studies. There's not a lot of research, but we found 2 case studies where a patient was initially diagnosed with leukemia, and when they first treated with antivirals, they were like, oopsie, it was Epstein-Barr. Didn't matter. Once they put that label on, you have it, and you have it for life. And so we're almost free. As far as the trauma healing goes, we kind of, what do you do? We're powering through, and then we're certainly Judah's in counseling. He needs a lot. He's terrified to leave the house, that someone will take him. He's terrified to go to a doctor. He's young, and this was scary.
Yeah.
With time, we'll figure that out, but we don't have time right now. Right now, we have to figure out how to protect other kids from this.
And when you look at the difference between, Kirsten, I'll ask you this, the pediatric and adult treatment options. I mean, it seems like, the pediatric option is, you show up, you do this, no choice, period. Is that correct? And how does that differ from adults?
Well, I think with adults, we have the ability to, first of all, get true informed consent. With the pediatric cases, informed consent is just refer back to, this is what we've done. And they won't offer any true alternatives. And the risks aren't always completely disclosed either. And so, but with adults, I know the first thing that I would do if I would get a diagnosis, I would go get the latest research. I would look at all of my alternatives. I would, I wouldn't necessarily be beholden to 1 or 2 different doctors who are giving me, what their recommendation is. I would look at all of the alternatives that could be utilized. So, but because these parents are under such a grip of fear, that I know countless parents who they fully know that if they say the wrong thing at a clinic visit or at a doctor's visit for their children, it goes in their medical record permanently hostile, non-compliant, etc. The label is there. Adults don't have to deal with that. We have our own free will for that. So parents are really up against the wall right now, and it's terrifying.
I am thankful, Shelley, that Judah did so well physically through this whole ordeal and a whole process. But all kids are different. I mean, it seems like this is a lockstep protocol. Extrapolating my own son in this situation, he's a poor excreter of drugs. Drugs will stay in his system longer. He just, his CYP enzymes, his methylation, his sulfation, he has a really hard time detoxing. How can a single protocol cover all of that?
I'm so glad you asked that we brought that up. You're familiar with MTHFR, of course.
Right.
Their core drug for this entire treatment is methotrexate. He gets it at least weekly, if not more. Methotrexate, there are studies telling us not only is it high risk for AEs in kids like this, it's also very low efficacy in kids with MTHFR. So it's toxic and it's not even helping. And so when we showed them that, we said, we did our own genetic blueprint because you wouldn't. And here's what we found. And here are the studies that tell us more about what that means to him. They said there's not an alternative. And Judah's biggest struggle through this has been neurotoxicity. And at one point he was inpatient for methotrexate toxicity. It's been the hardest part of all of this. He cannot handle that drug, but it doesn't matter to them. But I think an adult would say, what do you mean my genes might impact which drugs work? I need a genetic panel. I'm going to find out. It was like $300 to prevent suffering. Absolutely, we would do that.
Yeah.
The other thing is there are better tests. We have tests now where you can take your cancer cells and test them against all the current chemo drugs on the market and find out which ones are actually going to kill your cells. So instead of giving you this many and hoping some subset works, you just use the ones that are going to work for you. An adult can do that. We asked about that. They said, no, we can't wait for those results. That's going to take a week. We start today. And so we weren't allowed to do that. An adult would never tolerate that. Never. They would not start chemo without a biopsy. They would not start chemo without being sure it's the drugs they need. And if there was more information to have a more precision treatment plan, we would do it, right? You are not allowed that opportunity with a child.
Wow. And how effective, I mean, you look at the current standard of care, it is 40 years old. There aren't choices. There are things like that. What about kids that are not like Judah, that do not respond to this? Do they just sort of keep on trying the same thing over and over again? What happens?
You say that almost jokingly, but if he relapsed, let's say we're a year off treatment and they say they see lymphoblasts again, they start over from day one, the same treatment over again. And they may add a bone marrow transplant or some heavier drugs. They just do it again. And I'm thinking it didn't work the first time. And they claim, so for his risk category, they say they have a 95% cure rate for this cancer. The other side of that is these secondary cancers like lymphoma and AML caused by the chemo, they don't count that. So 95% chance we can get rid of this cancer, but for the rest of your life, you're going to have to monitor for other cancers. The other thing they don't count is the children who are lost to chemo side effects. So the sepsis, the acute infections, we're very fortunate Judah's had 0 acute infections in 2 years. I don't think my other kids have even done that well.
Oh my goodness.
But we've been supporting him so well and very intentionally to not get sick. So they're losing, and this one is harder to find numbers on, but I've seen numbers as high as 40% don't make it through treatment because of secondary issues with their response to the drugs. That's pretty high. Yeah. So they love to promote their 95% cure rate. They do not talk about what's actually taking these kids, and it's the drugs. And if there is a way to do less drugs or less toxicity, and yes, people are studying it, and yes, it's published, but we have not yet adopted it into the protocols.
So this needs to change. I mean,
it needs to change.
It does. So we don't wait until our kid has this diagnosis. We need to do this now. I mean, and Shelley, having lived through this, I mean, this is a horror that if we jump to action, then hopefully we can prevent for other families. Kirsten, what do we do?
Shelley and I feel very, very strongly about empowering parents. And part of that is it's multifactorial. So parents need to be empowered with current research. And that's what we would like to do. We would like to be able to somehow get the current information, the current research and data that is existing, into the parents' hands. So then they can go to their doctors en masse and start asking these questions, because I truly believe when you talk about true informed consent, how many doctors, they're going through their day and they're seeing, okay, I'll throw a number out there. They have 40 patients that they see that day. Out of that 40, maybe 3 parents really ask the key questions in informed consent and actually turn it into informed consent discussion. When those numbers go up, and I think that we can approach this as a collective, when those numbers go up and then that doctor goes home that night, or he or she is performing their chart notes, and they set that those 3 parents turns into 13 or 23 or 33, that's gonna make a difference. And that will force our doctors and our medical professionals to say, okay, to take a step back. I think that's number one. I do not personally understand how scary it is to receive a diagnosis of pediatric cancer for my child. I can only imagine. I think that it's important for parents to also just be open-minded, to understand that it doesn't have to be the one size fits all protocol, that there can be alternatives in parallel to chemotherapy, or alternate complementary treatments and therapies that can help keep the child healthy as well. But I think that parents are just so, this is all they hear. They don't hear about those other complementary therapies. So I think asking parents to be open-minded as well is critical. And we're trying to find other people who are working on policy change. We've started working with our North Carolina legislators to see what we can do in our state to help hand power, at least some power, back over to parents without being worried about being threatened with having their child removed from the home.
Exactly. Parents need a medical bill of rights. They need the ability to push back. Shelley, having gone through all of this, what advice would you give to parents that may be looking at this or similar types of diagnoses?
I would love to tell you to run from the medical system, but sometimes we need them, right? Mm-hmm. We need to be able to go in and trust that they're going to do the right thing, the personalized thing for our kids. I think you need to be ready to, no matter how afraid you are. I'm not going to say we weren't scared. We were terrified. You got to take a deep breath and say, I have to fight for my child. I have to do what's evidence-based and correct for my child. Just get real brave. And I think if you think, well, this won't happen to me. I thought so too. Mm-hmm. We do all the things that you would expect of a family who's evading toxic lifestyle things, right? And the other thing is chemo spreads just like vaccines shed. So unfortunately, I was pregnant. I was 30 weeks pregnant. His diagnosis, it impacted the growth of our baby. And there was a lot of fallout from that. He was failure to thrive and other issues because the sweat and the vomit and everything that hit me as the caretaker of holding Judah around the clock went through my skin and impacted the baby. Very scary. And so as you dig into that, you're supposed to be washing their laundry twice, flushing the toilet twice, not letting them have any skin contact with anybody around them. We are out in public all the time. We're buying clothes from thrift stores. Are there kids at your school shedding on your kids' chemo? I had no idea that was an issue. Our family, adults in treatment, shedding chemo on our hair thinned from his chemo because we were his caretakers and we were in contact with him. This impacts all of us if kids are receiving toxic levels of chemo that may be more than necessary. We all need to be in this fight because your kids could get hit too. It's really scary knowing that chemo causes other cancers, and it's out, just oozing out of kids in treatment and adults.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. Shelley, for sharing your story. Kirsten, for sharing your wisdom and this call to action. We need everybody to act. We also need everybody to pray, Shelley, for your family and specifically for Judah. And let's get him, the next deadline is April 3rd when that treatment is done. We're excited for you to get across the finish line and please come back anytime and update us.
I just want to add really quick, when things got so crazy and we were actually kicked out of St. Jude's, they said they would not provide our care anymore, right on the same day as the CPS referral. They said, we're kicking you out and sending you to CPS. We needed help. And as we started calling other providers to finish his treatment plan, nobody wanted him. Another doctor in the medical freedom movement stepped up and partnered with our wonderful pediatrician and called all over the country until they found us another hospital. And I'm just so grateful because this community, it's big and it's connected. And that network of people found us someone to finish treatment with a promise of protection that we're going to make it through these last few months. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get through it without being thrown to the wolves again. It was Dr. Rennie Moon.
So Dr. Rennie Moon, you might be familiar with her, but she was fired for speaking out in 2022 at one of Senator Ron Johnson's Senate hearings, and she was fired from her job in Washington because just literally for questioning the safety of the COVID vaccines in children. She's a pediatrician. Wow. And she also brought the information leaflet and showed the 24-inch, this page intentionally left blank. But yeah, that's what Shelley and Sean were up against, where they had a matter of weeks to find another provider to get Judah's next port flush conducted. And then also be willing to take the ongoing care until April. So we did. We really stepped up, and we had a lot of champions step up for us. But I think that's what's needed now too. We've got to, and I know that this story is scary, but I would be remiss if I didn't just reinforce one more time about it's scary being a parent in navigating our medical circumstances right now for our kids, but our voices are needed as a collective. And when we have enough strength and bravery to step up and ask those questions as a collective, then I have no doubt that will start making the change and for the better for our kids.
Absolutely. There's such strength in numbers, and our numbers are growing every day because of wonderful, brave people like you. Again, thank you for joining us today. We would love to have you back and get an update. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this important episode of Doctors and Scientists.
Okay, we're live. What's your name, please?
Stephanie, sir.
And Stephanie, this is about your mom.
Yes.
So tell us about her.
Well, my mom is 83 years old, and so being in, that age group, she's considered high risk for COVID. So of course, she went and got all of her COVID vaccines, including her boosters.
Do you know if she got Pfizer, Moderna?
She got Moderna for the first set, and then Pfizer, and then Moderna again. I think her doctors are doing the mix and match.
She's had a few.
She's had several. Whatever one she's supposed to have had by this point, she has had right on time. So she follows what her doctors say. And after, I believe it was the third, so it would have been her second booster, she called me, "Don't want you to worry, but I've started to have vaginal bleeding." And I went, ding, 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 I'm sure I know why. But nonetheless, the doctors did their due diligence. They did ultrasounds, they did biopsies, MRIs, all of the testing, and could find no reason why. So, no cancer, something like that. And I sent my dad an article that was, talking about how COVID can be connected with menstruation, and asked him, please send it on to her doctor, which he did. And I asked him, did you hear anything back from the doctor about this other possible reason for why she might be bleeding? And he said, nope, got no response. So that's where it ended. Fortunately, the bleeding has stopped, but I don't know if it will come back, and who knows what else will go on with her.
Is she still having more shots?
She's still having more shots. Yep, whenever she's supposed to get one, she'll get one.
Regardless, she just will keep going.
She'll just keep going.
COVID shot, flu shot, whatever shot.
All of them. RSV, pneumonia, all the things that they want the elderly to have.
Does she live at home, or is she in an assisted living or something?
She lives at home, so she's in California with my dad.
And she just keeps going. I can't.
Keeps going. Just keeps going. Yeah. And she was terrified. I mean, she thought she had cancer for sure, and had to go through a lot of really uncomfortable tests. As we all know, any of those feminine things can be really uncomfortable. And she'll keep going, even though I said, I think that's what it's from. No, couldn't possibly be. So
she says it. And I presume the doctors,
They gave no response when I tried to give them actual scientific data showing that this was something that's been shown to happen after shots. So didn't want to hear it. And she's with Kaiser.
Did you get the COVID shot?
No, I did not.
Do you have any of these conditions?
No, I do not.
Myocarditis or
No myocarditis,
paralysis or
no
anything?
paralysis.
Nothing? Did you get COVID? Whatever that is.
Yes, I did actually. So I was in the Bay Area, San Francisco area in March of 2020. And so at the very, very beginning, so we locked down Friday, the 13th of March in that area. We were the first. And I got it right then. I'm a veterinarian, so I was an essential worker. So of course I was out and about and still seeing people. And I had about 3 days worth of coughing. And compared to colds that I have gotten in the past, I mean, I usually can work through my colds, but this one I took a couple days off. But that was
Did
it.
you treat it with anything?
Vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, homeopathy, the things I normally use. It was really before people were talking about ivermectin, so I didn't use any of those things.
You're a veterinarian.
I am a veterinarian.
Let's talk about ivermectin then for a second.
Yes.
So, what do you think about it?
I have seen lots of people use it and be very effective in my, friend group and, people that I know. It's been really helpful for them when they're sick, especially if they have comorbidities. Like I have, friends who are heavier set, have, lung issues, smoked, whatever it might be. And I have found that when they add ivermectin to the protocol, they get better faster and they don't, and I don't know anybody who died or went to the hospital at all.
So the horse ivermectin that you get in Tractor Supply, is that the same as ivermectin is ivermectin?
Ivermectin is ivermectin. Although the apple flavor that horses love that they put in the paste for the horse paste does not taste good. I don't know how people can choke it down, but they have.
but it's basically what I was getting at here is, they're screaming, "You're not horses," and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It is the same thing, just with a horrible flavour.
Exactly the same thing, just a horrible flavor. Yes.
Thank you for clearing that up. Anything else you want to add to this?
No, just thank you for everything you do, and I hope that these stories make a difference.
Certainly will. I wish, gosh, we'll pray for your mother. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.